Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugle, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugle 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. To become a member, go to rmef.org.
And the podcast is also brought to you by OnX Maps. And with OnX Maps, you can know where you stand with the most accurate hunting GPS tech on the market with land ownership maps that work offline. Go to onxmaps.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 20% when you sign up for an app membership at onxmaps.com.
The podcast is also brought to you by Gerber. Go to gerbergear.com and learn about the knives, the Vital, the Big Game Vital, the Gator Premium, all the things that we use when we're out in the woods, and not just knives, but also some really cool multi-tools that they have.
We're also proud to partner with Sitka Gear, and if you go to sitkagear.com, you'll see their full line of clothing, and their tagline is turning clothing into gear, and they are doing that through advanced technology that allows you to stay in the field longer, hunt harder, and stay safer.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by GoHunt.com. Go to GoHunt.com and sign up for the Insider. The Insider is changing how hunts and hunting information are found. No doubt about that. Use promo code ELKTALK, and when you sign up for the Insider, you're going to get $50 of store credit, mad money, in their gear shop.
And we are also brought to you by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls is the original designer and inventor of the pallet plate diaphragm that's completely changed the way elk calls are made and used. And to find out more and to order your elk calls, go to RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com or BuglingBull.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 15% on all of your elk calls and elk call accessories.
And with that, Corey, we are ready to get into it.
Let's jump into it.
Morning, Corey.
Good morning. It's actually, we're just afternoon here.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. See, I obviously haven't had enough coffee this morning.
Well, it's that time of year when mornings and afternoons kind of all run together. So
Yeah. Well, and the next few days are the Christmas period. This is December 23rd while we're recording this, and I'm picking my mom up at the airport here in about 3 hours. And do you ever have this pressure that when your mom's coming to your house, everything's got to be absolutely spick and span and clean, or your mother-in-law or somebody?
I
My mom's
don't.
a clean freak. And so I've been up nonstop working on my house because my wife had carpal tunnel surgery on Friday. So usually we tag team this cleaning stuff, but it's been all me. So I look like Cinderella right now. I'm running around here with a dust mop, and I'm not painting a very good picture of an elk hunter, am I?
You're not, and you're not following through on your own advice. But
I know.
I guess you do have to make exceptions when your wife has surgery. You do have to help out around the house then.
Yeah. But I have had time to go scan a few of our Elk Talk podcast comments. Where you forward those to me? Where do those come from?
just off our website. So folks can go to the website at elktalkpodcast.com and just in the contact form, send us their questions. And every once in a while, we get a chance to read through them and have a day like today where we can just sit down and answer some of them.
Yeah. Well, I was down in Arizona hunting coos deer, and I started scanning through a bunch of them. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Those people must think we know what we're talking about, because they ask a lot of tough questions.
Maybe they just copy and paste their questions and they go to like 30 different websites. And if that's the case, they're going to find out how little we really know, because they probably got real answers from someone else.
Well, I went through some of them and I kind of formulated a bunch of them into 3 or 4 kind of, I'll call it basic questions, but they all have variations to it. And I think if we jump into it and answer them, that hopefully will cover what the people were looking for when they asked these types of questions. And that, if you're up for that,
yeah,
I think we'd figure out how we do this. There's one about applying for tags, allocating budgets, and saving costs.
Perfect. We're talking about budgeting money for hunting 2 days before Christmas. This is perfect.
Yeah. Hopefully you asked your significant other for hunting tag money for Christmas.
Exactly.
That's the number of times when I first started applying in multiple states where I'd tell my wife, you don't have to buy me anything for Christmas. I just did a Colorado application, or I will do a Colorado application, or whatever it was. And she would look at me like, "You serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm serious." Cool. Saved me the headache. The other one is people want to know about when you're planning hunts in certain seasons, pre-rut, peak rut, whatever, post-rut. What do you focus on? What's your top priority when planning? Some questions about how would you approach certain things as a weekend warrior. Let's see, what else? Calling, late season and post rut, about calling or not calling. Which one of those would you want to start with?
Oh man, let's start with money.
Money.
Let's come out of the gate swing. Let's talk about budget.
Okay, I'll paraphrase the question. I wrote it down. Jay, I think if I remember right, said he lives in Missouri, and he's been out elk hunting, and he's now full-blown addict. And in his household budget, he said, we have allocated $1,000 per year for tags and licenses. My wife comes with on these trips. She enjoys being in the outdoors, so we don't count the trip costs as part of this hunting budget since we share this jointly. With that background,
that's a great cost savings tip right there.
Yeah.
Bring your wife with you, and then you can allocate part of the family vacation fund to the hunting fund.
Yeah. Or bring your husband with, whatever it might be.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like Jay's already ahead of the game here from most people.
Yeah. He's got $1,000 to spend on license and tags. That's great.
Yeah. So he said, with that background, where would you spend this $1,000 each year for both a long-term and short-term plan to hunt elk every year?
So he's not just looking at spending $1,000 on license and tag. Then he's making a plan with $1,000 a year that would include future trips as well. Yep. That's great.
That's what it sounds like.
Perfect.
So, I've got my ideas. You want mine, or you want to give yours
Well,
first?
I would imagine, since we went through, each of the states in detail at the beginning of 2019, and I'm sure we'll go through them again for this year, but I think you and I are probably pretty similar on what we're going to say as far as the states that are the best bang for the buck for long term, and then the states that are most accessible for short term. So you go ahead and list what you have in mind, and I'm guessing I'm going to be right there with you.
Yeah. So one thing he didn't say is whether he was primarily a rifle hunter or archery hunter, because that would change my ideas of what I'd tell somebody. And the reason being, one of the possibilities is, and it's not the number one possibility. I wonder if I should almost start from the bottom and work my way up, reverse engineer this, is to his point that he wants to hunt elk every year for less than $1,000 of license and tag fees. Depending on where he lives in Missouri, so he's not that far from Colorado. So I would say plan on Colorado being your fallback no matter what.
Yeah, you can go every year. You can get a tag there. What license and tags? It's under $700, right?
Yep, exactly.
And 61 or something.
Yeah. So that would kind of be the way to answer you and your wife get to have a trip out west every year. But let's say he lived in Washington or California or Oregon or Nevada. I would say Idaho is that.
Yep.
Go hunting every year option.
Yep, and it's under $600 at least for right now. It's on the table to discuss increasing non-resident fees as well as maybe limiting some non-resident opportunity. But I don't think in the near-term future we're going to see any major changes that would change this conversation at all.
Okay, so. If depending on where they lived, I would say pick Idaho or Colorado as the place where you're going elk hunting this year. Get on the ball, be with it, and don't wait till the last minute. And know that that's something you can do. And I don't care whether it's archery or rifle. They both have. I don't know. You'd know Idaho. Is there a big difference between the quality of the archery hunt versus the quality of the rifle hunt?
No, I think it's going to be similar to anywhere that we talk. There are going to be more people in the field during the general rifle season. You're going to have to work a little harder because the elk are going to very quickly get pressured. The season length, in Idaho, we've got a 4-week season basically for archery, and then it's about a 3-week season. October 15th through November 3rd is the average, and it changes. Every unit and zone has a little bit different seasons, and there's some later season hunts and everything. But for the most part, you're looking at 4 weeks for archery and just shy of 3 weeks for rifle. And Colorado is very similar for archery. Rifle season, though, I think you're a little more limited on your time there. So if that's a consideration as far as calendar dates lining up, those are, at least for rifle, those are considerations. But I think, for Idaho, we have, I wouldn't say quality, but we have quality opportunity. And that's for both archery and the rifle seasons. Similar to Colorado, a lot of opportunity in Colorado, and I think Montana falls into that as well, with the caveat being you have to draw the license there as a non-resident.
Yeah. Well, whether Colorado or Idaho was the safety net that I'm going hunting, let's say that took $700 by whatever it might be, application fees or whatever. If I had one of those as my fallback, I would also, somewhere along my course of events, I would apply for one of the limited entry tags in Idaho.
Because if you're going to hunt Idaho for sure, you have to buy the license to apply for the limited hunt in Idaho. And if you already know you're going to be hunting in Idaho that fall, buy the license early and apply for a limited tag. It's not that much more just to apply, and you already have the license.
Right. Colorado is a little bit different, that because Idaho doesn't have a point system. Colorado has this preference point system, and it might be worth trying to build some points there if someday along the way you want to have a hunt that maybe has fewer hunters in the field at that time, but it's going to cost you part of your budget. So, okay, so we spent $700 by knowing we're going elk hunting. That gives us $300 left.
Man, all sorts of options now.
I would say beyond any doubt, you buy your $50 point in Wyoming each year. So now that leaves us $250. And right behind that, you might get differences from some other people about thoughts on this. As some people might say, oh, I'd rather build points in Nevada or Utah because if I draw, I'm going to have a superb quality hunt, blah, blah, blah. And I get that, but the odds are so small that if I had $250 left, I'd probably buy a license and apply in Arizona. And that's going to cost me about $175. And I'm going to build points there. And I'm probably also going to apply in New Mexico. And that's going to cost me the $60 license.
So you got $60 in New Mexico. What's a New Mexico elk tag?
The tag, depending on which one it is pushing about $800.
Okay. So with that $1,000 budget, if they were to draw this year, they would still be within their budget. They'd go to New Mexico and they would forego Colorado or Idaho. Yeah.
Yep.
I like it.
So the point being, I guess, that Jay's strategy of building a pool of $1,000 is a slush fund that, not counting equipment, not counting trip costs and other stuff, he and his wife, and he didn't say if she hunted. And the way it's worded is, it sounds like she just likes to tag along. But for one person, I guess, the answer being, if you build $1,000 pool of money over time, you can get you can cover quite a few of the bases in Western hunting.
No, and I think that you cover all of those different strategies because you're going to hunt every year, whether you draw New Mexico or you fall back on Idaho or Colorado. And New Mexico, you might not, they don't have points either, so you might not draw New Mexico in 15 straight years of applying, but you might draw it 3 years in a row. And then Wyoming, I think Wyoming is that middle tier state that you can draw a good hunt with 3 to 6 or 7 points. Obviously, as a non-resident, you have to draw the general tag there, which takes you 2 or 3 points. But you can get a good quality hunt for not much more than what you spend on the general. And then Arizona is, that's kind of the long term. That's one that you're going for to hopefully find a big bull and getting experience along the way with hunting these other states every year.
Yeah. And the good part about Wyoming is you can buy that point in the later part of the year. I think July through September or something like that. And back to the point where I brought up whether he archery hunts or rifle hunts. If he was an archery hunter, I would suggest if you had the extra money to buy the preference point in Montana. So we got this goofy thing, preference points and bonus points.
It's not at all confusing either.
Montana wrote the book on how to create complicated, unnecessary, overly burdensome regulations for non-residents. I don't know. Well, I know the history of how we got here, but so I think it's $20 for a preference point towards the general tag as a non-resident. I should know that, but since I'm not a non-resident, I don't pay attention.
I'm just glad they simplified the process, because it used to be if you applied and didn't draw, you could get 80% back, or you could get a tag and you could do this. And at least now they've made it a little bit more user friendly. You only need 2 attorneys now to be able to get through the regulations and apply instead of the 3 that it used to take.
But if Jay was not an archery hunter and was a rifle hunter, I would say that coming to Montana on a general rifle tag is not a good use of his money compared to doing the same in Idaho or possibly even Colorado. If he's an archery hunter and was coming to Montana on a general tag, I'd say, that's a worthwhile investment in your money. But we're getting to be so darn expensive here that it could blow his whole $1,000 budget here. So
Yeah, it's what, $885, I think, for just the elk
Yeah.
license in Montana.
Yeah.
And that's, if people ask, what's it cost to hunt out of state? I round it to about $750 plan on for license and tag. And, it's like we talked, Idaho's less than that. Idaho's under $600. Colorado's just under $700. I think Oregon's right there about $750 for license and tag. Wyoming's, for their regular tag is just over $700. And then you get into Montana at almost $900. I think Arizona is what, $820, $830, somewhere in there. So I think
by the time you add in the license,
yeah. So if you plan on that $750, that'll get you probably within $100 either way in most of the states that you'd want to look at.
So I guess the answer we gave here does address I want to hunt elk every year. That's Idaho, Colorado. I want that's the short-term plan. And the mid-term and long-term plan would be, the mid-term would be Wyoming, the long-term would be Arizona.
Yeah.
And he's still within his $1,000 budget.
Not too bad. Yeah. Huh. And honestly, those are going to be your biggest expenses. So, Jay's coming out with his wife and they're not counting that into their expense. But beyond that, really all you have is fuel and groceries. And if you needed any gear, but gear is, I don't know. I think people get wrapped up on gear and they think they need to save up $3,000 to get boots and backpack and a new bow and all these different things. But the reality is, if you're hunting whitetail or you're already a hunter, you've got everything you need. Yeah, there's some things that would make you more comfortable, but you have everything you need already. So just throwing that out, you're probably looking, I would say you could get, just throwing out there, $300 for fuel. And again, it's going to depend on where you're coming from and where you're going to. But if you're traveling 1,000 miles one way and gas is $3 a gallon, you get 20 miles a gallon, you should be in that $300 round trip or so. And then groceries, you can eat really cheap for 8 or 10 days if you have to. And
yeah. I struggle to count groceries and food as part of my travel and hunting budget because I eat when I'm at home. To add that as part of the budget implies you don't eat when you're at home. And people seen videos we've done where my wife is such a great cook that I miss her cooking when I'm away from home. And so in the summertime, we will make trays full of, I say we, she kind of runs me out of the kitchen. She's like, do you want this to be edible or not? But we make trays full of lasagna. We make pots full of spaghetti or whatever it might be, stews and stuff. And then we freeze them in vacuum sealed bags and we bring them with. And that's a lot of times, that's what we're eating on the road. So you can save a lot of cost.
And I've experienced that firsthand. I've been the recipient of your wife's home cooking when we were in the field. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in New Mexico, we had, I think we had wasn't it blacktail spaghetti, and we had some lasagna, and we ate like kings down there. And all you had to do is boil water and drop that vacuum sealed package in the thing of boiling water for 5 or 8 minutes, and it warmed up, and you take it out and eat it. And it was just like having a home cooked meal.
Yeah. So that kind of gets us to the next question that I kind of summarized from some of the comments was, what are ways for me to save costs so I can hunt elk every year? I think you just touched on there.
Number one, hunt with your spouse. Add the hunting budget and the family vacation budget all into one. That doesn't really save you money, but it increases your budget. So it's one and the same, right?
Yeah. I think Jay's going to get a couple hero biscuits for coming up with that idea.
Oh,
and people are going to be saying, can I get his email address? I want to figure out how he talked his wife into that. But no, I think that's one. If you're having to travel from, some faraway place, splitting the cost with 1 or 2 other hunters cuts that gas cost. Probably makes it easier so that you can drive and in a shorter period of time, rotate out, and I'll drive 3 hours, you then 3, and then 3, and keep rotating, and you can make really good time. So you're less time away from work, less time away from home based on just windshield time.
Yeah.
Don't, like you said, and part of this is I assume that if people are asking this question, like you said, they're hunters already. So they probably have what it takes to deer hunt. And I'm assuming they probably, maybe it's an incorrect assumption, but I assume they have something like Go Hunt or Onyx, as their navigation system out there in the field, maybe at home. I know if I was a whitetail hunter, I would really have that, because I'd want to know every little piece of land there is and who owned it and if I could get permission or whatever. So I'm assuming that some of the things that we use out here, they probably already have.
Yep. And I think, when you look at it and break it down, we can fill our backpacks, we can fill the truck bed with gadgets and gear that we really don't need. Yeah, they make it comfortable, they make it more comfortable, they might contribute in different ways, but when you break it down, really you need some clothing, you need a backpack, you need some boots, and you need a weapon, and then of course your tent or sleeping bag and that. But like you said, most people, if you even camp, backpack, even if you haven't been hunting before, a lot of times you're going to have a tent and a sleeping bag and boots and a backpack. And again, there's always money that can be spent to make things more comfortable and more efficient, but just to be able to go, don't get wrapped up in, I've got to have the latest, greatest. I've got to, this guy sent me his checklist and he's got 70 items on it and I've got to get every one of them. Those are really the only things you need, a water bottle to carry water in. And, from there, I think, some kind of water purification. You mentioned Onyx, so having some kind of navigation. But beyond that, we're talking elk calls, wind checker, stuff like that is pretty minimal in expense. So,
yeah. But don't get me wrong. If you got a big budget and you want an excuse to go buy some stuff, I've never discouraged anybody from buying cool stuff, stuff that's probably going to, like you say, make you more comfortable and help you maybe not get wore out as quick. But don't do that at the expense of actually going.
Totally. Yeah, and that's where I was going with that. You'll be able to accumulate gear if you go, like Jay mentioned, he's planning on going every year. You can spend a limited amount of your budget each year and just pick up one item, as long as you have the mainstays to get you out there and back. That's all you need. And then, like you mentioned, there's things that you can pick up to make you more comfortable. And there are some things that I think truly do add to your success rates that come from gear, but just to get you out there and to have a chance of being successful, no, you don't need to spend much on anything that you don't already have.
I think we're going to have to title this episode "The Dimestore Elk Hunt."
Well, that's how most of us started out. I can remember I remember getting my first set of Sitka gear in 2006, and it was, until then I'd wore the cheapest $12 or $14 discount cotton sweatpant looking pants from Walmart with a $6 or $7 camouflage t-shirt. I never had anything other than cotton. And my boots, I never had a pair of boots. My first actual hunting boots were after I'd graduated college. Until then I wore shoes, just tennis shoes. And so we all started on that shoestring budget as hunters, and then as we recognize the value of gear, we've been able to add a little here and there. And it's I still, people say, well, you guys have all this fancy high-tech gear and everything, and I still am just fine in my plaid flannel and my wool pants and old pair of boots that I've had for logging for the last 15 years. And you can. So don't ever let gear be the limiting factor to go on an elk hunt. That should be the last concern, I think.
Yeah. Somehow I managed to still go hunting when my wife and I were freshly out of college with a baby to feed and student loans and all that stuff, I just took what I had and I made it work. And if I would have spent at that time in my hunting days or that time in my marriage, if I would have spent on hunting what I spend today, I wouldn't be able to give marriage advice because it would have only lasted about 15 months instead of 30 some years.
Well, keep in mind your marriage advice is worth about what people pay to get it. So that's
right. Yeah.
Not saying that because you didn't spend money back then, you're qualified to give marriage advice. It's just you would be in a different situation had you spent that money back then.
Yeah. Point being, we all were there as we've gotten, older and our finances are a little more comfortable. We're able to allocate more to that. But I don't think you or I ever stayed home from hunting because, I don't have a new bow this year, or I didn't get a new pair of binoculars, or gee, look, these boots aren't the brand new boots. How am I going to go hunting? I don't think we ever let that get in our way.
Nope, not at all. So saving money, I mean, that's honestly, we talked if you were just going to go. So I guess just looking shoestring budget here, if you've got all those basics that we talked about and you don't need to spend anything on that, really it comes down to gas, groceries, and your license and tag. And so if we're looking, say, $600 for Idaho, or we'll just round up and say $700, and you aren't looking long term, you just want to go on an elk hunt, $700, depending on where you're coming from, your gas is going to be anywhere from $100 to $300 round trip, which if you bring a buddy, you can split that, and that makes it even lower priced. And groceries, if you make all your food at home and freezed it, whatever you do, I mean, you realistically can go on an elk hunt for under $1,000.
Right. Plus, if you're lucky, you're going to come home with about, I don't know how many, if you had to go buy that elk meat or the equivalent of it down at the grocery store. I'm never foolish enough to try justify hunting from an economic standpoint. But the point is, you're doing this, you're taking time out of your family time, your work time, whatever it might be. But if you're lucky, in addition to the great memories and the good exercise and the experience, for that $1,000, you're bringing something home that you're going to get to eat on most of the winter.
Totally. So I guess maybe we should, this podcast should have two titles this episode. We need the shoestring budget, and then this is the year to go elk hunting. So make 2020 the year you go, and don't make any more excuses. No reasons to hold back. Plan your vacation now and start budgeting and go hunting this 2020, fall of 2020.
Yep. If you don't go elk hunting this year in 2020, it's not because you couldn't. It's because someone made a conscious decision not to. I don't know. In today's world, is $1,000 out of hand?
I don't think so. You start now, you have 10 months. That's $100 a month. I think most of us could go out and find a job shoveling snow or raking leaves or doing something to make $100 in a month just on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. So my wife claims that she could go sell all of my junk that's in the shop for far more than that. And she threatened. I don't think you can give it to me.
That's another option as well. What do you have that you can sell? Don't sell any of your hunting gear because you'll have to replace that. But
sell your golf clubs.
There you go. Yeah.
If you can afford to golf, you can afford to elk hunt just about anywhere. Now all the golfers are going to send up irate messages. Oh, all right. I think we've covered those first two questions. So, Jay, thanks for sending that one. I think it's very applicable to a lot of people, even if their spouse doesn't tag along with them. But I think the points Corey brought up is the other parts of the hunt aren't that big of a hit to the household budget, where even if your spouse doesn't go along, you can probably still get it done for under $1,000.
Yep.
So, all right. Since you're the calling expert, Corey, a couple of these questions related to there were some comments about do elk call in October and November. Is it worth my time to bugle? Should I even carry a call? Blah, blah, blah. Post-rut, which is sometime the last half of October, and then late season being, mostly November and December. Do you carry a call with you or not?
Always. Yeah, I never go elk hunting without calls. So
okay. So that answers one of the questions.
Yeah, and I think to elaborate on that, September obviously is a time we think of. That's when you need calls, and we get a lot of questions. Just either through the podcast or through Elk 101, and I know you get a lot of them as well, but is it worth carrying an elk call in rifle season, which now we're talking usually October, November? And yes, absolutely. So case in point, this year, early September was great calling. By the last week or so of September here in Idaho, the elk weren't talking much. I mean, this is very generalized because just in the area we were hunting, they were very non-vocal. And I think a lot of it had to do with 3 weeks of hunting pressure already, in addition to the big storm that hit that last part of September. It just shut them down, and we had troubles getting them to talk. But then about a week later, I noticed the elk started firing up again, which got me excited because my youngest son had a rifle tag here in Idaho. And I kept tabs on that herd of elk pretty much, I wouldn't say every day, 2 or 3 times a week leading up to rifle season, and including the night before. And there were 2 herds of elk that came off the mountain every day heading down to the private land in the bottom where they'd go in water and spend the night rutting, and then they'd come back up in bed behind the private land the next morning. And they were like clockwork, but they were so incredibly vocal trying to keep those 2 herds separated. And opening morning, which is August 15th here, October 15th. Yep. They were screaming. And, it was like September. We didn't even have to bugle. We just followed the bugles and got in position. And obviously I can't not use the bugle. So I was calling, but we didn't have to. That was the point I wanted to make, is we didn't have to. So, a week later, I want to say it was the 20th. I don't remember what day exactly of the week the season opened, but it was about a week later. I took my oldest son out, and we literally stopped along the road and bugled, and the bull answered up on top of the mountain. And we were able to drive partway up the mountain and then unload the bikes and get in on them. But as we were going in there, we got off. We actually bumped some elk in the road, and so we got off the bikes and walked up to the point, and an elk bugled down over the hill, and we ended up calling and probably had 20 or 25 bugles that morning from, I would guess, 2 or 3 different bulls.
So you're talking like October 20th,
somewhere in the 20th. Last year, we called in his elk. It came in fired up on October 28th. So it's, you aren't going to go out like in September and bugle off every ridge and expect to get an answer, or find fresh sign and bugle and expect to get an answer. But there are elk that are still bugling. If you can get into those areas where they're not as pressured, or you get into an area where they have been pressured and now 2 herds have come together and the bulls are trying to keep them separated, they'll be vocal. And, I certainly wouldn't count on calling an elk in during those seasons, but if you can get one just to respond, there's one there. And that's what I learned this year hunting Montana in November. That's 99% of the battle is just finding the elk. And if you have a bugle to do it with, that makes rifle hunting a whole lot easier. So I wouldn't go around bugling from every ridge, and, just obviously keep in mind you're hunting in a season where there's a lot more people and they carry rifles, and you don't want to attract their attention. If you get in a place that looks pretty elky and there's elk in there, I would certainly suggest throwing out a location bugle and trying to get a response.
Yeah. Well, I always carry a diaphragm call with me in case the bull's moving off because something happened, trying to get them stopped. Even in October and even in November, I've seen them stop to look when you make that cow call. So I try to always have a diaphragm with me. The bull I shot this year in November in Montana, it was November 9th, I think, 8th. He was bugling. and he was jousting with another 5x5. And that's the second time now in November I've had full on just crazy bugling. And one time was in Wyoming, and now this time, hey, you think about how much pressure there is on elk in Montana the first week of rifle season. We were in there the second week of rifle season. And a cow obviously was in cycle, and that was enough to get this guy throw caution to the wind, and it turned out to be his demise. But I, like you, I would have never walked around bugling that day. But
Well,
the fact that
anybody that watched our day-by-day series, they saw me. I bugled just about every day, even though,
Really?
it was usually one bugle just we get up to this phenomenal looking ridge, and knew that it would reach a long ways, and thought, by chance, there might be one of those really dumb bulls like the ones Randy shoots that still bugles in November. And we couldn't even find one of those dumb bulls, but I think there's always a chance for a vocal animal, and if you can just elicit a response out of them, that's 90% of the battle in rifle hunting, is just finding the elk. So if you can, especially if you're hunting heavy timbered stuff and you can't glass, or your glassing is very limited, a bugle at least tells you, hey, there's an elk there, and from there it's the hunt's on.
So some of the earlier rifle seasons in Colorado and in New Mexico start October 10th, 12th, something like that. And you said what? October 15th is when it starts in Idaho?
Yep.
So it wouldn't be a waste of time then to at least experiment and see, hey, is anyone willing to listen?
You go to like a private ranch that doesn't get a lot of pressure, or Yellowstone or somewhere like that, and the elk will bugle all the way up till the 1st of November pretty consistently. They definitely taper off, and the big bulls start moving away. They know the main show is over, but you'll hear bugles. I guess I wouldn't go as far as to say consistently, but it would not be at all odd to hear bugles up till the 1st of November. I think what changes their habits is the rifle season starting. And so, first day or first 3 days of rifle season in any state, I think you have a very real chance of hearing elk bugle, just because they haven't been pressured. Once they start hearing those gunshots go off, that's what kind of sends them into running and wises them up pretty quickly. But I'd say, all the way through October, if you're hunting the first couple of days of a rifle season, I think you have a chance of hearing bugles.
So this year, 2020, I've got 3 Colorado elk points. I'm thinking of burning them, just not because I'm going to get a great, glory unit out of 3 points, but I could get a first season tag that has fewer hunters in the woods, which makes, in my mind, a higher quality experience. I think this year it starts October 12th. I could be wrong on that. Somewhere plus or minus a day or two from there. So, following Corey's advice, I would be remiss to leave my bugle back in the truck.
Are there any seasons in Colorado from the time archery ends until that October 12th?
Some of the units have what's called early rifle that starts October 1st, but most of these areas that I could get a tag for with 3 points do not.
Yeah, I would almost say it's better to have that week or 2 week period between archery ending and that first rifle season starting. The elk settle down, there aren't as many people in the woods, and I would think you'd have as good of a chance of getting one to bugle on October 12th on opening day of that season in a lot of places as you would, the last week of archery season.
All right. Well, come October, I'm going to report back to you.
Well, only if it worked. If it doesn't work, let's just forget we had this
conversation. So we'd be leaving the audience hanging out there if we didn't tell them where they could save money on Rocky Mountain hunting calls, correct?
So they can just go to
promo code Elk Talk.
Anywhere you go, if you just try the promo code Elk Talk, if it doesn't work, that's don't talk to us. But anybody mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it should work. So Rocky Mountain hunting calls, you can save. What is it? 15%? Pretty substantial
Yep,
discount.
I think so.
Just use promo code Elk Talk and save on elk calls and use them in October and November.
Yeah, and I guess to wrap that point up, the summary of it is there's nothing to lose by just being out there and giving it your effort with some calling. And maybe your buddy will, give you a bit of raspberries or something, give you the hard time. Oh, you didn't call one in. Well, guess what? It's October 28th. That's why I didn't call one in.
And again, that would be my point to make is don't expect to hear calls. Don't expect to call elk in, but also don't discount the fact that you can still get an answer. And that one time you get an answer, for us, the last 2 seasons, we've shot 3 elk during rifle season with a rifle, and all 3 of those elk were bugling fairly aggressively anywhere from October 15th through October 28th. In fact, going back 2 years before that.
What's that? Unit. These were general unit public land
over-the-counter tags. Yep.
Also,
in fact, going back even 4 years ago, Isaac shot a bull on October, I think 23rd or 24th, and there were 2 or 3 bulls screaming that morning going in there. And again, I think that what rifle season creates is a lot of pressure in a lot of areas, and it ends up concentrating the elk in those places where they're more safe. And when you get those elk coming in there, a bull's got his 6 cows, another bull's got his 12 cows. They come in there, the cows are wanting to mix. I mean, it's not like they want to stay in their separate little herds, but the bulls want them separated. And so those bulls a lot of times get very vocal and very agitated trying to keep their cows away from another bull. And it's not uncommon at all to have rifle season actually generate some of that vocal behavior from the elk.
Well, hopefully that covers the question that was asked. The answer is yes to all of them. Every call, yes, call. Yes, use your diaphragm. Yes. I guess just yes.
Any question you have about elk calls the answer is yes. Yes.
Yes. And if someone leaves a note on your truck that says you call too much, ask Corey for what the response should be. All right. I'm going to try summarize a whole bunch of questions here into one question that has a few parts to it. A lot of people are asking questions about when you're planning your hunt of where you're actually going to start your hunting each day or the first day, whatever. What is the number one or top priority that you consider when doing a hunt in? I put these 4 seasons down, Corey, because there were a mingling of questions among all of these 4 seasons. So I can't say this is the precise question that was asked, but I think if we cover it, it'll answer the questions people were getting at. So pre-rut, if we say that somewhere early September, there's not hard dates to any of this. Peak rut from mid-September to early October. Post-rut, mid-October to the end of October, and late season, and if we consider that November and December. What is the top priority you have when you are planning a hunt during one of these periods? And how about we break it up where you answer the pre-rut, peak rut priorities, and I'll answer the post-rut, late season priorities.
Okay. And what is it exactly that we're looking for? Like, this isn't e-scouting. This isn't picking a unit. This is actually we're in the unit.
Yeah, and I don't want to throw a dart at the map and just randomly go. What determines where you're going to go? And even though quite a couple of the questions said, I know there's a lot of factors that go into this, but if you had to pick one, what is the factor you give the most weight to? Maybe
that's easy. I go where the elk are.
Okay.
Number one every time. That's next question.
Yeah. Where are
what
the factor then do you weight most heavily in determining where you think the elk will be?
That's a lot more complicated. I like the simplicity of the first one.
Go where the elk are.
Yeah. So I guess, pre-rut, looking at that, and I would go back, pre-rut probably goes all the way back to August 15th, because I think Nevada and Utah, a couple other places actually have elk seasons that open mid-August. So I think, you've talked a bunch about, you've got to realize what the needs of the elk are. What's the priority that the elk need during that season? And I would say that first portion, well, probably the entire pre-rut period, that whole latter half of August into the first 4 or 5 days of September, the need is on feed and water. And if you're hunting an area, any of the states that get hot temperature, climate, your priority is going to be water. And those elk have to come into water every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So finding the water sources is going to be key. You get into a place like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, a lot of times there's plenty of water everywhere. And so that doesn't really concentrate the elk, especially on a year where they've had a wet spring or, more of a mild summer. You aren't going to find elk necessarily concentrated around water. So then it becomes the feed source. So I guess just having an understanding, the nice thing about that pre-rut is they're usually still in their summer pattern. So you have all summer to figure them out, to be out there scouting, if you're able to scout, and get an idea of where they're at. It's probably the easiest time to pattern an elk, I think, during that, because they really aren't changing too much. A lot of times that's about the time the bulls, especially the bigger bulls, start leaving the bachelor herds, and they go to what I call their staging grounds, areas where they wait for 2 or 3 weeks. Just they're by themselves, they're getting irritable, they don't want company, but they're not ready to go hang out with the cows yet either. And so finding those little areas and knowing those areas from year to year, and I always put a pin on my Onyx when I'm during season out hiking and find one of those little bull bedrooms where that bull just lives for 3 or 4 weeks during the pre-rut. And really what I'm looking for is just a massive amount of rubs. And if you get into an area where there's a rub here and 50 yards up the trail, there's another rub here, and 100 yards down on the hillside, there's another rub. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking every tree within 60 yards is rubbed. That's where that bull went right when he started shedding his velvet. That's when they start getting irritable. They leave the other bulls and they hang out in that tiny little patch where there's just, water close by. They've got feed right there. It's usually on a north face, kind of a thicker area. And literally there could be 50 or 60 rubs right there close by. So I'm always paying attention for that, because even that first week of September, a lot of times you'll find, and a lot of times it's the bigger bulls that you find in those areas. And so if you are targeting a bigger bull that first week of September, which I still consider to be the pre-rut, that's certainly what I'm looking for. So if I am boots on the ground or even during season, I'm always paying attention for that, for the benefit of going back there pre-rut the next year.
So you think, and I kind of have my thoughts on this. I'll say the answer to my question before I ask the question is, I think the answer will be yes to this, is that bulls find these spots and they use it year after year, that first late part of August, first part of September.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that we found it in Montana in November this year. There's several places we went that we'd get in there and it's just this little bench on a north face that was just littered with rubs, so many rubs. And, you just can't confuse it for, there's been a bull in here during the rut. No, these are the pre-rut rubs. And we'll get into, you sometimes get into a meadow and there's 3 or 4 rubs around the edge of the meadow, or even 5 or 6 rubs around there where a bull spent a week or 2 during the rut, and every morning he goes and tears up a tree. That's different. When they're in these pre-rut areas, sometimes they'll tear up 4 or 5 trees a day, different trees, just getting the velvet off, scratching the itch of their antlers there on the tree. But, that's also the time when the bulls are building up their neck muscles. You look at a bull and his neck on August 10th, and then you look at it again on September 10th, he's a different animal. And that neck is swollen and he's really built those muscles to be able to fight and defend his harem with his strong neck muscles. You just think about 1,000 pounds of brute force and antlers coming at you. You've got to have a strong neck.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible to see the transformation that takes place in their bulking up, and then by the time the late rifle seasons come, how withered they are. I don't know how they survive.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, they go into winter without much fat. I think their fat reserves are to keep them from burning through too much of their muscle reserves in September, because they don't eat. Those bulls they don't stop and eat. They're continually running. Their adrenaline is pinned the whole time, and their metabolism is incredibly high for that month of September.
Yeah. So next on the calendar then would be peak rut. Anything, it seems that these bulls are probably a little bit more mobile across the landscape, searching for cows. Is there anything that is your number one thing you look for of all the things you look for?
Yep.
Is there one that stands out among all the rest?
Number one for me is a bugle. So that's okay. As funny or as simple as it sounds, that's all I'm looking for in September is a bugle. And we'll cover miles, and obviously we have to know what we're looking for, where we're going to find the highest chance of hearing a bugle. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, but that's really how I would boil it down and say, I want to call in an elk. I've got to find an elk that's bugling, and so we're literally looking for bugles. With that being said, hunting Roosevelt elk this year, one of the things that I've put some weight in it before with Rocky Mountain elk, but never as much as what we were able to with Roosevelt's, is looking for rubs. And it's not the pre-rut rubs now, it's the rut rubs. But those bulls will travel, and Rocky Mountains travel too, looking for cows. But the Roosevelt's are very patternable in their travels, and it's almost straight line. So we'd get on a mountain, and there'd be a road that would, zigzag and switch back its way up the mountain, and we'd come to these rubs along the road. And so we'd get out and mark it on X, and then we'd go up the road a ways, and all of a sudden there were more rubs, so we'd mark them. We get to the top of the mountain, and it was almost a perfectly straight line from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, or wherever we were, where this same bull walks the mountain and just happens to cross the road. And where they cross the road, there's, they can actually breathe and rub their antlers on a tree instead of just thrashing it through the brush, trying to get through the brush. But it was very, it definitely opened my eyes to the differences in Roosevelt and Rockies in their habits, and just how patternable their rub. It's almost like a whitetail scrape line. These rub lines of the Roosevelt's, and if you find a rub along a road, there's a good chance you're going to get a bugle response somewhere along that rub line if you can track down where the bull's at right then. So we went back day after day to these same rub lines and would bugle off of the ridge that would access a lot of that rub line, and almost without fail we were able to get an answer from an elk.
Well, kind of related to that is, when you came up to Montana a few years ago and we archery hunted together, some people said, hey, it looks like you guys weren't way back in the middle of nowhere. And my answer is, no, we weren't. I follow Corey's lead that more important than anything is a bugling bull. It doesn't matter if it's near a logging road, near a trailhead, down low, up high. I don't put a lot of focus on the remoteness or the, what we call sanctuaries in peak rut, because these elk are just moving wherever the cows are, and they don't have it in their head that someone's shooting at me with a rifle yet. So they really haven't developed that sanctuary instinct. So my point is in the peak rut, don't think you got to walk 8 miles back there, because you might have walked past a lot of elk getting there.
Absolutely. No, and that's, I think being remote brings benefits. I think you're going to find less pressured elk, generally speaking, the farther back you get. They might be, depending on the area and a lot of other factors, they might be more apt to be vocal because they're not pressured as much. And so if you are looking for bugles, the more remote you get, the better chance that a bull is going to bugle. Whereas, if you're hunting close to the front country, if you're hunting off of a road, they're listening to ATVs go by, they're listening to all that, and they just might lay there and not bugle. And if you're trying to get an elk to bugle, that's not a good problem. So, but yeah, I definitely, I never walk away from the truck without bugling, because I don't want to get 4 miles back in there and realize there was a bull bugling 100 yards from the truck. I start my bugling the second we leave, and sometimes we get an answer there. And tell you what, I would much rather pack an elk 400 yards to the truck than 4 miles to the truck.
Yeah. Well, my answer to post-rut and late season are going to be somewhat similar responses, but with variations to them. I'm going to say post-rut is once rifle season start in September, and it doesn't matter what date you want to put on it, September 15th or 20th, whatever. Yeah, did I say September? I meant October.
Yep, October, okay.
All right. See, I told you I didn't have enough coffee today. Anyhow, yeah, I'm talking anytime the rifle season start in October is what I count as post-rut. And people hear me talk about sanctuary areas once the shooting starts, and I think that's the first thing I look for, but not all of them are created equal. These post-rut ones in October, those are going to be higher up the mountain or further away from the road. This bull's probably going to be in solitary mode. They're not in bachelor groups yet, usually. And so he's just looking for a little place away from everything, probably closer to the summer range than the winter range. So I look at summer range, transition range, winter range. And in hunting seasons, most of the time these elk are on the transition range. They're not all the way up on the summer range, and they're usually not all the way, at least the bulls, not all the way down on the winter range. So in that band of transition range, normally the sanctuaries that I look for in the post-rut of late October is going to be stuff that's closer to the summer range. And it might be distance, it might be topography. It doesn't take much of a pocket for a bull to say, you know what, for some reason hunters don't come here and I like hanging out here. So I look for that. And then I also look at, is it a place that I can approach to get a shot? Because having an elk in a place that's just nothing but a huge expanse of dark timber in late October is a tough proposition. There are elk in that dark timber. That is a sanctuary of some sort, but it's not a sanctuary I'm going to spend a lot of time in, because I'm never probably going to see them. And if I do, all I'm going to hear is the thunder of hooves running away. So I'm looking for places where some topography or some openings in the canopy give me an opportunity to get a shot when I find one. But these are going to be higher up the mountain or farther away from the roadhead, or in some of the places where they use canyons as their sanctuaries. These are probably going to be the deeper parts of canyons where they aren't just off the lip. They're way down in there, and you're not going to want to haul one out of there.
It's amazing how elk hunting's like that.
And then
it seems like where you find most of them, you don't want to haul them out of there.
Yeah, it kind of is. Right. And then the late season, I'll say this is probably November 1st and later. These sanctuary areas that I'm looking for are closer to the winter range. They're further down the transition range. If it's canyon country, these might be sanctuaries that are further up the canyon, because they're coming up out of those canyons every night to feed where the good feed is. They just got to start restoring body fat. So for both of those periods, I'm looking at sanctuaries, but they're not all the same. And also these bulls are probably in bachelor groups. And so they're looking for areas where 4, 5, 6, 8 bulls can make a living in one spot. And people will say, well, what's that look like on a map? Well, over time, you got to learn how to read a map. The amount of time I spend on my OnX desktop is crazy. I hope OnX never puts a time meter on my desktop application
or a time limit.
Yeah, because I'm going to be timed out, no doubt. But it takes time of looking at satellite imagery, learning how to read topo lines, stuff like that, and eventually you kind of get a feel for it. So those are the things I'm looking for. I don't know if that answers the questions of these people who, I got a sense that they felt that this was a huge, vast landscape, and there's a million things that could convince somebody that, hey, they should be here. And I think they're looking for, how do I narrow that down further? So I take this unit that's 5,000 square miles and I can cut it down to 5,000 acres or something.
No, and I think I definitely had the easier part of that question, because with Prerut and peak rut, I think it is easier to find the elk. I think once they go into that sanctuary mode, during your prime time of post rut and late season, it's tough to find elk sometimes. And we saw that firsthand in Montana this year. And there were a lot of comments. People said, yeah, Corey and Donnie went on their own for 2 days and didn't see an elk. And then the first day that they went and teamed up with Randy had them on elk immediately. And so I think there's definitely a skill in knowing where to find elk during different times of the year. And it's not at all the same from season to season.
I think I would, whoever made those comments, I would equate that to luck, or good or bad.
I don't know. It was every day that we shot elk every day that we were in the area you were hunting. So that's not luck.
No, it's again, I'll call that luck. But you think about where we were at, how many people were there and didn't see an elk?
Oh, we talked to people that, on the roads and everything back there that hadn't even seen an elk, let alone had a shot at one. And this is open country where you can glass them a long way away.
But a ridge that is 900 vertical feet above a trail, it serves as a sanctuary.
Yep.
And bulls will go bed on that. So what do? You climb up to other ridges where you can glass all these ridge tops, and you find some elk. Yep. And the guys walking the trails down at the bottom are looking at their boot tips as they're walking through the snow, like, another hike today. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just over time you learn. Experience tells you, okay, where are the places? You can almost tell within the first day, where's most the hunting pressure? Well, it's going to be down lower. It's along the trails. It's near the trailheads. You can see the human boot tracks. You can see other hunters on the landscape and see what they're doing. And then from that, you kind of say, all right, if that's where most of them are concentrated, the elk are going to be somewhere else. So just observing what those hunters have done or are doing has probably helped you eliminate 2/3 of the topography in that area.
Yeah. Yep. And I think I approach it kind of as a mix of knowing the elk are going to be away from the crowds, but also knowing I have to cover a lot of country to find them. So I almost hunt them like archery season. The only difference is we don't get a bugle, so we're just hiking miles and miles, hoping to stumble upon a track or glass one up. And you definitely have it dialed in pretty good, because we wasted a lot of energy covering a lot of miles in areas that we probably shouldn't have wasted that time in.
Yeah. Well, mostly I sent you to those places because it was a repayment for when you put that 12-pound rock in my pack in Mexico.
There were definitely people that caught on to that too. They're like, why? Is it as not obvious to you sitting there watching this as it is to us that Randy sent you someplace as a punishment and he's over where the elk are shooting them right now? That does seem pretty obvious to the rest of us here.
All right. Before the beans get spilled here, let's move on to another question. I think this one applies to a lot of people, and again, I'm summarizing. you and I both acknowledge that we're lucky that we get to hunt elk as much as we do. We get to hunt weekdays rather than being relegated to weekends, depending on what our calendar or the season dates fall. But a lot of people listening and watching our content, they are the quote unquote weekend warrior. That's kind of what their schedule allows.
Yep.
And so I guess the question is, if we had any ideas or tips for those who are relegated or can only hunt weekends, are there things that our experiences have given us that would maybe make a better use of those 2 days that they have when they're out, whether it's archery season or rifle season or whatever? Are there things that we have used, and sometimes we got to hunt weekends also because of how the season dates fall. So we're out there with everybody else. Hey, you got any feedback?
I think a couple thoughts there. First off, if you're only hunting weekends, you're probably more local to the area, and you aren't coming from Ohio and hunting in Colorado. You aren't going to go there for a weekend hunt. So I think that's a benefit, that you are more local. You're probably a resident of the state or close by, at least close enough that you can do some scouting in the summer. So I think there are advantages there that you definitely need to take advantage of. The hard part about only hunting 2 days at a time is sometimes it takes 2 days just to find the elk. And, whether that's archery or rifle, sometimes it literally takes a couple days just to dial in and say, okay, we're too low here, or we're too high, or there's no water here, or, whatever it is, there's wolves here, we need to relocate. It'll take you a couple days kind of to get that dialed in. And the problem is, when you leave and head home on Sunday and don't get back up there till late the next Friday night, it's a clean slate sometimes, and it changes that much in a week that they might be completely out of the area again. So it really makes it difficult to have any consistency going from weekend to weekend. With that being said, I think having that experience year after year and learning it, is vital. If you're brand new to an area and you're going in there and just weekend hunting, it's going to take you a couple of years probably to kind of learn it and understand it. If it was me and I had 2 days in a row to hunt, I would be as mobile as possible. I would hunt 4 different areas, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. If that was your time to hunt, I would be in 4 different areas unless I found elk. And if I found elk, I would be in those areas again and again until I had to go home. I think that's a lot of times people get locked in. They go and they set up camp, and they lay out their spread, and they set up their wall tent, and they put their stove in there and their cot, and they move everything in late Friday night, and then they hunt Saturday and Sunday, and they get back and take down camp Sunday afternoon and head back home. And they hunted that one drainage where they set up camp because they had seen elk there last year or for whatever reason, and they didn't see anything. And they go the next weekend, they go back to the same place and, leave camp set up or whatever. But I would say if you have 2 days in a row to hunt, be mobile. Don't ever get lost. In fact, I would hunt 3 different areas in a morning if I could and if I had to, just trying to find the fresh sign and get on elk, because you just don't have that luxury of spending time finding them. You've got to find them immediately and then start hunting them.
Yeah. As I was reading some of those questions, some thoughts were entering my mind of where I wish I had been a local who could have went out the weekend before season or 2 weekends before season, or I would have had some local intel that would have helped me. One time in New Mexico, I had great plans only to find out that firewood cutting season opened in this area October 1st. And that was when my son's elk tag started, or October 2nd, something like that. I can't remember. So I had great plans, and we go out there, and it's the buzz of chainsaws like you've never heard. I was like, all right, let's go someplace that's not open for firewood cutting. So all the locals already knew that. So why did I think I had this place all to myself right at daylight? Because the locals knew, come about 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, the woods is going to be full of firewood cutters. I've also went on out-of-state hunts where in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is it. This is where I'm going to set up shop. And I get there and it's dry. There's not a drop of water for 4 miles in any direction. So there are things that weekend warriors, if you want to call them that, have as their benefit, where they can mitigate the risks of a complete strikeout by going out the week before or 2 weeks before and seeing what the water situation is or what the road closures are, or things that are going to at least prevent you from showing up and having a complete blowout. So there are, and I get that. I go back to your point of, if they are hunting weekends, they probably are more local or regional at least. And for me, because I focus so much of my stuff on rifle hunting, one thing that I look at the hunting pressure as a big driving force in rifle seasons. And so the hunting pressure on opening day. So if my first weekend is an opening weekend, like in Montana, we always open on a Saturday. I don't know if other states are always that way. I have my plan for opening day, and then I have my plan for the rest of the season, because the deck gets reshuffled after all the shooting opening day. I can also use that weekly cycle of hunting pressure, where I know that by Sunday evening, when the weekend folks have been there, the elk are going to be as far back and as dormant and as hidden as any time during the week. And Monday, they think, oh man, maybe things have lightened up a little bit. Tuesday, a little better. By Thursday and Friday, they're starting to feel a little more comfortable again, because there's less pressure out there. There's still some. So that where I'm going to focus my effort on Saturday morning is going to be different than where I'm going to focus my effort the next, just a day and a half later on Sunday afternoon. And like you said, they're going to be different areas. The other thing, when I was hunting just weekends, I would do everything I could to clear my schedule and be out at the trailhead Friday night of where I thought was my best possibility. And I'd try not, if at all possible, I didn't want to be driving to the trailhead Saturday morning. You can get there late, your plan can go awash, you can get there and find out, oh, there's 8 other guys at the trailhead. Or if you can get there Friday evening, it's going to give you a little bit better feel of how much hunting pressure is going to be here. You're going to get organized, you're going to see what changes might have happened, and you're going to be right there ready to go, and you're going to be way back there before the sun comes up Saturday morning. And again, I would be as mobile as possible. I wouldn't hesitate to hunt one spot Saturday morning and a different spot Saturday afternoon and a different spot Sunday morning and a different spot Sunday afternoon.
And even within that, I would say, Saturday morning, I'm going to have 3 different spots that are, high likelihood I'm going to hear a bugle or see an elk, that are within a mile of a road, that I'm able to hike up from the truck, get up on that ridge and bugle if it's archery season. If I don't get a response, I'm jogging back down to the truck, driving 4 miles up the road to another spot, hiking up to that ridge, and by, say, I don't even know time frame wise, because it gets dark so early right now, but say it's getting light at 6:30, I'm going to be on that ridge at 6:30 bugling. And if I don't have anything, I'm going to be back at the truck by 7 and up to the next spot at 7:30 and, up there bugling. And by 9 in the morning, I'm going to have hit 3 different spots and hopefully at least seen sign or heard a bugle and be hunting at that point, because you just can't spend all day hiking in a barren wasteland of elk and expect to have success in a 2-day hunt.
Yeah. I really, the people who can pull it off doing weekend hunts and pull it off consistently, I have so much respect for them, because it is a lot of work. You really got to hit it hard. You need to have your A game on and on what these elk do in response to hunting pressure, in response to weather, response to whatever. Those folks who can do that are on top of their game.
Absolutely.
I guess another thing, at least as it relates to rifle seasons, is, and this kind of goes back to my point of getting there Friday night, is with hunting pressure, these elk are staying out for much shorter periods of time. Your windows of opportunity to find them up on their feet feeding are very short times in the morning and very short times in the evening. Do not be walking in the morning, hunting your way in. Though that is not a time of the year to hunt your way in, because by the time you get to where they most likely are, you're not going to see them because they're bedded up somewhere that they're just not visible. So, and don't go hunting with somebody who says, "Oh, I got to be home by 11 o'clock this morning when the football game's on." Clear that slate. You're hunting with somebody, clear the slate about that kind of stuff right away. Or you say, all right, grab your own rig then. Man.
Yep.
Hey.
No, and going back to I think any season you're hunting, stay out all day. If you're a weekend guy, don't come back and take your 3-hour nap in the middle of the day at camp.
Right.
That's elk will bugle all day long. In September, I think that you have a chance of, if it's late season, you're out hiking ridges looking for tracks. Don't just sit on an open hillside and think, my only chance is to glass them across on that hillside and have to sit here all day and hope they come out, because they might not.
Yeah. Well, we've received in our hunting absence, if you want to call it that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions and comments from the link out there on the website. I think we could spend most of the winter filling in our podcasts with these kind of questions, or summarize
Totally
coming up with ideas, or at least reformulating bundles of questions to hopefully provide as many answers as we can in an hour and a half.
Yep. And one other topic that I think, for my own personal selfish interest, I think we need to get Bo on here.
Llama Man?
Llama Man Bo.
Okay.
It's my wheels are turning.
Yeah.
After hunting for a couple days and seeing the llamas in action, I need more answers to some questions I have.
The number of emails I get about llamas now that we've been using them the last 3 years, crazy. I'll talk to the hunt that you joined us on in Montana, where Matt from Onyx and I shot my bulls. I don't know that we would have been shooting bulls that far back in without the benefit of llamas. Well, first of all, we wouldn't have time. We would have shot one bull, and we would have spent the rest of the hunt hauling it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that it's so much a matter of where they're at. I think that where I'm at now in life, it doesn't make sense to shoot any elk without a llama.
Well, remember, that was my 55th birthday while we were out there, Corey. So no matter where you're at, I'm further out there in front of you in terms of my appeal for llamas.
Well, if I start hunting with llamas now, that makes me 10 years smarter than you. Yeah, not 10 years younger, but 10 years smarter.
That's right. Well, we already knew that.
There's so many applications, and the more I think about it, I think, first off, my kids want a pet. So that check, that's one reason. We could use them shed hunting. Ooh. And go back in and haul all of our gear back in shed hunting into these remote areas we go to, and then we try to figure out how to get elk antlers out of there. Now we hike our camp back in there. The llamas pack the antlers back out, and then just for hunting season alone, there was benefit. So I'm almost to the point of justifying being interested in them.
Really? Wow. I'm not a shed hunter, so that thought never entered my mind until you just said this.
But think about grouse hunting. Think about the places you could go grouse hunting and load up those panniers with grouse.
Or at least load it up with my camp and have virgin grouse that will just stand on the trail and let me thump them.
Exactly.
So that's what I call a good grouse. The one that doesn't flush, just stands there. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm in. All right. We'll get him on.
So now, I think we need to get him, and I'm going to have a whole list of questions that originate around how much does it really cost to buy one? How much does it cost to keep one? How much food do they eat? Are they considered a pet for family purposes?
Well, I think that we got a good topic on our hands then.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do too. So you prime him, let him know that I'm coming at him full assault with questions here. And if anybody else, this is an open invitation. If anybody else has questions about llamas, send them in now, and then we'll bring them up when we get Bo on here.
All right. Well, Corey, I appreciate all the questions we've got here. I hope people continue to send them. They really get me thinking when I read those, and I read every one of them. We don't have time to respond to every one of them, but I read them all. They really get me thinking about how the content of this podcast, but also the other content I produce, how to structure it, and what is valuable to people who are going to give their scarce time to listening or watching what we produce.
Yep.
Very helpful.
Totally.
And how can they leave questions again?
Just go to
elktalkpodcast.com.
Yep. Just go there, and there's a link to contact us, and just fill out the form with your name and your question and hit submit, and it makes it to our email inbox somehow. The inner workings of the interweb, and it makes it to us, and then comes full circle, hopefully at some point, and makes it back in the form of. I was going to say it makes it back in the form of a made-up answer. So it definitely loses value along the way of the path that it takes, but it does come back to where it started.
Someday, can you teach me how that works and teach me how to use Instagram?
No.
Okay.
I'm only 10 years younger than you. You need somebody at least 30 years younger than you.
Well, I have a bunch of 20-some, early 30s that work for me, and they do all my Instagram stuff. Well, I have a firm in Minnesota that does most of it, but when we're out in the field, those guys are doing it. And they tell me, oh, we got to do an Instagram story. I'm like, what? What? I just say, tell me what to do. So if someone sees something really stupid on my Instagram, it's either ignorance because I tried to do it and I just plead ignorance, or it's because my crew did it and they thought it would be funny for me to make a fool of myself.
Hey, do you have a blurb from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation that we can share before we wrap up?
I should.
Can I share one if you don't?
Yes, if you would. There's one that they just did over in Oregon, and I got it here. Where did I put it? You go ahead.
Okay. Well, we talk a lot about access, and we talk a lot about different projects the Elk Foundation does. But one of the things that caught my eye in the latest issue of the Bugle magazine, which you receive as a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, is research projects that they do. And this one was on researching pregnancy rates in cows and how they can use satellite imagery from NASA to predict where the best food sources and nutrition is, and use that to predict the pregnancy rates of cows. And so as I was looking into it, just on their website, they had a news release that they just spent $1 million in 2019 on elk research. And I thought, that's a lot of member dollars going out to learn about elk and elk habitat and all that. But the really cool thing that caught my eye in it was the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation allocated more than $1 million in funding to further elk-related scientific research in 2019. Those funds leveraged an additional $6.3 million in funding from other partners. So we're getting, for every dollar of our membership, the Elk Foundation's turning it into $6 more from other partners on the research side. And I know it's similar for access and other projects that they do as well, that it's not when we spend $35 to become a member of the Elk Foundation, they're taking that money and not just putting that $35 back on the ground. They're taking it and turning it into $200 and then putting it back on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, the amount of research that they fund right now with all the new emerging technology related to collars and tracking and real-time GPS data, the amount of information that can be done and gathered with far lower effort and cost than back in the day when you had the telemetry collars and someone had to fly over or be nearby. It's incredible. And they're using that information. I'll use Wyoming, for example. Wyoming, there's a researcher, Dr. Middleton. He's researching the elk that migrate towards Cody, out of Yellowstone, towards Cody and other places in Wyoming, southeast out of the park. And he's using these GPS collars to identify these absolute critical corridors where these elk go through. And we're talking about part of the premier herds, part of the greatest stuff Wyoming has to offer for elk hunting. And if you say, okay, I can't go buy the entire corridor, I can't buy all the private land, how can I target my money and strategically use it and leverage it with these partners like you talk about to know that at least these critical corridors are not going to be disrupted? So they're doing stuff like that, and that's in partnership with the Wyoming Migration Initiative. There's this hoof disease issue in Washington and Oregon that they're funding. There's fire research that they're funding. There's a bunch of studies being done on what's called riding the green wave. I stole that from somebody. It's really about how ungulates are using the green up as it goes up the mountain in the springtime. As the snow melts, there's these green bands that are so critical to the cows and the does that are either moving up there with their lactating young ones or their nursing young ones, or they're moving up there and that's where they are going to fawn and calve. That kind of research is going to pay such huge dividends in the future. Yep. That it's, yeah, your $35 becomes $200, and a lot of $200 leveraging and benefits can get a lot of work done that improve everything about wildlife and elk yep. hunting and everything else. So the one I was thinking about, the Access Project, it wasn't in Oregon that I just read about. It was in Washington. And I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Cowiche, Cowiche.
That works.
And I apologize for hacking it up. I'm not from Washington, so I don't know. But Elk Foundation worked with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Pacific Power to add a bunch of acreage to the public domain that, again, they go and leverage this money. They buy the critical corridor that provides access to much bigger chunks. I think this one turns out to be 4,400 acres. And it's, let's see, I pulled it up here. There's over 2,000 elk that use this general area. And elk without access is, not yep. nearly as valuable as elk where we have access. So it's, the list goes on and on and on. But I'm glad you brought up the research stuff, because that's another one of our MEF's huge priorities. Yeah, they've got habitat improvement, they've got public access, but they have research as one of their primary focal points of their mission work. And there's plenty of research that needs to be funded that's beneficial. And for them being the catalyst that can bring yep. these other dollars together is good for all of us.
Yep.
So go to rmef.org and become a member, right?
No, and that's we've pushed it for a long time, and I'll continue to push it for the rest of my life, because our $35 collectively banded together is done so much for so long, and will continue to do important things that will keep us in the field and keep elk in the field, and make sure that that's this opportunity and privilege that we love is maintained as long as we can possibly maintain it.
Yeah. And if you want to become one of the volunteers for RMEF, there's already 11,000 of them out there. Amazing people. You can go to rmef.org, type in your zip code, and it'll tell you here's where you can volunteer to, whether it's a project, whether it's a fundraiser, whether it's whatever. There is no shortage of things you can use your labor and talent for.
Yep.
So, well, Corey, Merry Christmas to you and to all the listeners.
Yeah.
Even though they'll probably get this after Christmas. We'll, I guess, chime it up again after the holidays here and get back on a more normal schedule.
Well, we're just rolling right into application season again. It seems like we went straight from application season to prep season to hunting season to postseason, and now here we go again. So more content to come for sure.
Yeah. Is there one specific elk hunt that you are hoping for this year?
I honestly, we put so much effort into this season and then our Destination Elk video series that I haven't even wanted to start thinking about next season yet, because and the reason I say that is not because I'm not excited for next season, but we have so many opportunities and so limited on time that we're able to do them that I'm just hoping to let the dust settle and kind of see where we end up. And the opportunities, I don't say opportunities like, so many different opportunities, but I'm just becoming more aware of so many cool places to try to go hunting, and then all of our normal stuff that we like to do. We really just have to prioritize and choose just a couple, because that's really all we have time to do. So it's a bad problem to have.
Yeah. No, I'm there with you. This last year I took two of my uncles on elk hunts, one in Wyoming, one in New Mexico. They both shot a bull, and it reminded me how much I enjoy helping others and spending time with dear family members. And my son Matthew, he missed a lot of work with some illness earlier in the year, so he didn't even apply for any tags this year. He just applied for points, and it's the first year ever that we've not spent a hunting trip together. And so for me, I'm looking to make up for that plus another one, just because I don't care if I pull a trigger or release an arrow. Doesn't matter to me. I'm just wanting to go out to these cool places with people who mean a lot to me and make some memories.
Yep, totally.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Merry Christmas.
Yep,
Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, and we'll catch you on the next episode.